The Layah Heilpern Show. Sponsored by Step Finance, your go-to DeFi portfolio manager on Solana. BitMEX, the OG crypto derivatives platform and the best place to buy your Bitcoin.
Things really are just starting to heat up.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Layah Heilpern Show. So this month we have a brand new sponsor, the crypto exchange BitMEX. So a huge shout out to BitMEX, because without BitMEX, this wouldn't be able to happen. So as of May 17th, they're actually launching a brand new spot exchange to easily and instantly buy and sell crypto. So to celebrate, they're actually giving away $1 million in crypto to spot traders over the next few months. Now, this is actually the biggest giveaway in crypto. So if you want to enter, then I'm going to leave the link for you in the description below. It's going to be really exciting. There's a huge range of different assets that you can easily and instantly buy. So the description will contain all of the information about how to enter into that $1 million giveaway. That's pretty amazing. So today we are going to have a very interesting conversation. We are always talking about controversial things, which we're sort of not allowed to speak about. But we have a very interesting person who's going to be joining me today. So joining me is the 5-time world champion UFC MMA fighter. It is Jake Shields. Jake, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Doing good. Like I said, I slept in, woke up, trying to get my shit together real quick and wake up and do an interview.
Good. Well, I appreciate you getting ready and you being here because there's so much that I want to speak to you about. You've been very vocal recently, despite coming from, the MMA, UFC world. You've been very vocal about issues that you see in America. So before we delve into that,
Yep.
Can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, for those who don't know who you are, from your MMA career to your most recent stance on free speech, government, and I guess your fascination with crypto?
Yeah, well, it's just, for me, originally was a wrestler through high school and college, and then I got sucked into the MMA world through, I met legendary Chuck Liddell before he was famous and started training with him and just got completely addicted. It consumed my life. I'm sure, most people that do something crazy like fighting or a sport, and it's just all I wanted to do and just train. And everyone was telling me I was crazy, but then I seen Chuck Liddell start making money, so I'm like, oh, I can do it. And so luckily, I didn't listen to the haters. Like you said, went out there, won 5 world titles, fought, in the largest crowd of all time versus George St. Pierre, had many memorable fights, and it's been a great career. At this point, not officially retired, but I may fight again, but mostly just training people and investing and doing business, and which is, you're into crypto, which is something I need to get more into. I'm mostly invested in stocks, but now might be a good time to hop into crypto.
Yeah, now would be a great time. The market is down. Now is the best time. But no, I think, your career has been super interesting. I've been following, and we spoke earlier and I was mentioning that my brother is a huge UFC fan. So as a child, he'd make me watch. So we're going to delve into all that. I do have a lot of questions about your career. But first, I think what's really struck me is how you're sort of now taking on this weird culture that we have in America right now. So I guess my first question really is, why do you feel as a fighter the need to sort of move the fight in a different direction? And what would you say some of the biggest problems are for you right now in American society?
Well, a lot of why I started speaking up, I was living in San Francisco and stuff was just getting so weird and I could see it. But then I would have conversations with my friends and people would be like, yeah, I agree with you. I just can't say it because where I work and this. And I just kept hearing over and over, people agree with how I think, but they can't say it. And to me, that was so weird. And I actually never really used Twitter. I'd had Twitter for probably 10, 15 years, but my agents and stuff would maybe tweet out for me. I never used it. So I had the password. So I started, tweeting out some of my opinions. Originally, not to good reaction. I had a lot of people were angry, unfollowing me, cussing me out. I think I started tweeting right during the Black Lives Matter riots. And so, I was against the riots and the lockdowns, which are two things that are unpopular now. But at the time, the lockdowns and people rioting and looting was extremely popular in America, which is kind of weird. So I had a lot of people angry at me, but I'm like, you know what? I need to start speaking my mind, and just slowly did. And then it was crazy. It originally had my following was 100% fighting, but now I feel like it's probably more politics stuff. I get more traction on the political stuff than the fight stuff I tweet now. Originally, it was no traction on the political stuff, but then slowly I had people Mike Cernovich would retweet me, and I'll start picking up a new audience. I'd get a big guy like that would start retweeting. You're like, oh, you start picking up followers that, that think how I do.
But it was really interesting because when we were chatting earlier, you were saying that you were able to just say what you wanted to say and you didn't get backlash in your industry compared to other people, for example, like artists, musicians, they
Mhm.
secretly feel certain ways and they can't say it.
Yeah, I was extremely fortunate. I was unsure when I started speaking my mind, like how are other fighters gonna feel, and then it's almost all of them were on my side. Even with even with the Black Lives Matter stuff, because there's really not all there's almost zero racism in fighting. We're all brothers on the mats and in the cage. It's one place where you see everyone true to each other's 100% equals. We're guys, we might talk shit to each other, but I've never seen racism in fighting. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist, but it's very small. And you notice you didn't see, there's a couple fighters that wore Black Lives Matter, one or two, but it was not very many, no kneeling. And I respect the guys that did wear it. It's like we have respect for each other, but I think most of them realized that it was more of a fake racial divide than like a real racial divide in our country.
And even when it came to the lockdowns, how did the other fighters feel?
Almost exclusively were against it. The first couple weeks, a lot of guys were hiding out because I remember I was trying to train on the first week. I was calling all my friends, and they're like, "Oh, we're quarantining." I'm like, "Wait, what quarantining? What the hell? This." I'm not like the smartest person, but I looked at it. I'm like, "We're not going to shut down for 2 weeks, and the virus is going to go away." When they shut it down, it was already in all 50 states. You have a virus in all 50 states, and these experts are sitting there telling me that we can just sit there and it'll go away. Like, you have to be an idiot not to look at that and be like, "This isn't going to happen." That's when I realized I guess a lot of people aren't that smart. Because like I said, I don't look at myself as a genius, but I could look at that and be like, this isn't going to work. So I'm just going to go out there and get COVID early and get it over with.
I find it so fascinating when you told me that your colleagues and other fighters weren't that bothered by what you had to say and in fact agreed. It's sort of because fighting is all about taking responsibility. You're getting punched all the time. Like, you're sort of used to not living in a sensitive world, I guess.
Yeah, no, like I said, pretty much. I was so surprised all the fighters did too. Like almost all of them agree with it. It's like so few, and the guys that don't will still accept. We're not an industry where it'd be like, "Oh, you don't agree with us, we hate you," like you see on the other side. It's not like that. But yeah, I think it's the responsibility and the reality. Like maybe anyone willing to get locked in a cage with another man in front of like thousands, if not millions, of people watching. It's a pretty intense thing to do. So maybe it gives you a different perspective on life.
Yeah, I think that's it. If you're able to take a few, well, not a few, quite many deadly punches, then I think you can sort of handle, um, hateful words, which could hurt
Yeah.
your feelings,
I
basically.
think thing with fighting too, like we can get hurt there in the cage, but there's also the amount of stress that goes in there and the amount of like build up, the pressure. Because it's not like you're just fighting and might get beat up. You're fighting in front of, sometimes millions of people. Sometimes there's hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on the line if you lose. It could be there's just a lot of pressure people learn to deal with. And I think in regular life, people aren't dealing with those high pressure situations. And I guess fighters, once you get used to dealing with that, you see the world a little bit differently.
Yeah, I mean, you've been in so many high-profile fights, becoming Strikeforce champion, defending the championship. You fought GSP and the UFC champion. So, how do you actually deal with that pressure? Because when you're the main event and you're the last to walk out, how do you keep calm?
Man, it's tough when you're the main event. If you're the main event on a big card, it's stressful. I ain't gonna lie. You have to just stay as calm as you can. I always surrounded myself by really good people that I was comfortable with and laughing. People would all, a lot of times before a fight, we're sitting there an hour before, we're laughing, cracking jokes. 30 minutes before, we're getting serious, ready to kill. But like I would stay relaxed. You see some of these young fighters, it's like they're 3 hours out from their fight and they're yelling and screaming and jumping up and down. It's like, man, you better save that energy. You're gonna need it.
Oh wow! So how do you deal with it? You just have to only up to the bit where you walk out. Does that realization happen?
It's a realization. And yeah, I honestly try to like you'll think about it at night, the scenarios and the fight and stuff, but also trying to overthink it. And like, a couple days before, I just try to like bury the fight. Like, hey, I've done all my training. I'm just not going to overthink all the bad things that could happen. And when you do picture the good things. Always picture yourself winning, because you don't want to start getting in your head. Well, what if this happens? What if he kicks me in the face with this? What this guy has a good flying knee? What if he times that right? You start thinking about. You have to think about it a little bit, of course, so you don't walk into those situations. But I think some guys, they start over dwelling on all the negatives, and it causes them not to perform their fight. There's some fighters that I've trained with who are animals in the gym. And they get out there and they just freeze up because they're overthinking everything.
And you actually fought some monsters, both in Strikeforce and UFC, like
Mhm.
GSP, Robbie Lawler, Dan Henderson, Tyron Woodley. So, who was your hardest fight, and why? And why did they make it so difficult?
Yeah, man, I've pretty much fought all the best guys, so it's really hard to say. who my hardest fight is. I've had a couple really tough ones. Damian Maia was a tough one because he's a 5-time jiu-jitsu world champion, and that's my specialty. So we were fighting each other in our same specialties. I didn't get hit much in that fight, but it was interesting. Someone who had my level of jiu-jitsu, because he was literally the only other guy that, in fighting that had my level of jiu-jitsu. So that was interesting. Overall, pick one, probably GSP, because he was just, he's so good at everything. He has no holes in his game. He was a true perfectionist. And it's like, I fought him to a close fight, but it was just unable to open up those holes. And, I think I had a good training camp for that fight. I wasn't hurt. I have no excuses. I came in there my best self, and he still beat me with a close decision. So he's an absolute freak. There's some fights maybe I fought hurt or didn't have a good training camp, but that one, I trained perfect for, went in there and still came up short.
Something really interesting that I saw in the news, I think it just came out actually, the UFC news the other day, was that they're banning the flags. So when you come out and you have like whatever country you're from,
Yep.
And I believe that's something to do with Russia. Do you know more about this? Do you have a take on it?
I don't, but I know one of my, I think it sucks. I think people come up with their flags, but one of my fighters I trained, an English kid, Javed Basharat, he was born in Afghanistan. So he wanted to come out with the Afghanistan flag for his last fight. We get the flag on his shoulder, go to walk out, and like, oh, you can't walk out with that flag because Taliban's now in charge of the government and that's not their official flag. But like, I know a lot of Afghan people, and that's the flag they all post that flag. No one's posting the Taliban flag, so they wouldn't let him walk out with his flag. And I know he took it well, but it was kind of lame. So maybe it's stuff like that. Like they don't want, the people might look at one flag, the government says a different one. So it gets a little complicated. Personally, I think they should allow it, but I think it's something to do with that.
Yeah. I mean, like the UFC is supposed to just be about like getting down to business, doing the fights, not caring about political correctness. If that's the flag you want to have, that's your flag.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I don't think Dana White's a good person, but he's been great with dealing with political correctness.
Yes.
That's one thing. Even though I don't really like him that much, I think I'll give him credit where it's due. Like he tried not to stop at all during the lockdowns, which I had mad respect for. He was going to do a show on Native American Indian land in California because they don't have to follow California laws. But our dumbass governor went and called the head of Disney to get it canceled. It's like like California doesn't own that land, but somehow in his mind he tried saying like they own his land because it's in California. Like talk about not respecting the Native American culture.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. That's insane.
Yeah, because he has no jurisdiction over the Native American Indian land, but in his mind he said he did because it was within California limits, but it's not considered California. And he went and overstepped, in my opinion, his boundaries by getting that show canceled. Gavin Newsom's
totally agree.
Yeah, you probably don't know much about him. He's a terrible governor.
Yes, I've heard he likes to enforce rules and then not keep them,
exactly.
Just like most politicians. So let's go into America, and I guess also just your fighting background. So how important would you say physical challenges in helping you take on reality and the natural struggles that life will inevitably bring you?
First off, I think physical activity is absolutely crucial for every human, but men in particular, I think really need to do something physical and rough. I think maybe that's part of the decline in American culture. You get these weak men with low testosterone and weak. They have no confidence and they're weird and they start attacking and trying to tear everything apart instead of build it up. And that's why fighting and even jiu-jitsu, which is way less intense than fighting, the whole jiu-jitsu industry thinks the same too. It's not the same. You're not getting punched, but you're still getting choked. You're getting your shoulders cranked. That's what I've been trying to tell people. If you have kids, especially boys, but girls too, put them in jiu-jitsu. It's gonna build them character, gonna make them tougher. Also, if they get in a fight, they're gonna be able to win. But it just makes you a better person. I think it's humbling because all of us have had bad days where there's some dude on your back or laying on crushing you or choking you, and it's a very humbling experience to get choked out and punched in the face.
And do you feel like getting choked out and punched in the face helps you take on other things in life? Like if someone's being rude or if someone's, I don't know, whatever people cry about these days.
I think it does. And the weird part is for me, I was, getting in a lot of trouble as a kid, getting in fights, getting arrested. As soon as I started fighting professionally, I didn't do any of that anymore. I had no desire to fight. If someone talked crap to me, I could just be like, I don't care. I could beat this guy up. I don't need to prove anything. I think the only times I got in a couple fights I got in after I became a pro fighter is when someone would insult my friends. For some reason that still really bothers me. But it got to the point where if they talk crap about me, I'm like, I know I can beat this guy. I don't need to prove anything.
That makes sense. So for you, you mentioned BLM, you mentioned the lockdowns, but what would you say is sort of the biggest problem for you right now?
It's all like complicated. Everything's kind of tied together with the, they have the, it's almost like a bunch of people pointed out, it's almost like a Marxism coming in where they're trying to change what's true and what's not. The weird, it's all tied in, like, the whole trans things, which I have no problem with trans people. I actually just did an interview with Blair White, hung out with her. She was extremely nice woman. I have no problem calling her a woman. But if she went and tried to play a woman's sport, then I would call her out and have a problem with it. But she gets it, that's wrong. She prefers, being that way. So I have no problem if someone wants to do that. But to try to tell the reality of us, to tell us that isn't a man, that's where it gets weird. And then the worst part is the shit they're doing to the kids now, which I have a daughter who went through these schools, Marin, one of the most liberal places in America. So it's probably her school before most other places, but that, because she's a little older now, but I remember pushing this through her school. There was pushing this weird, you can pick your gender. There's all these like
Really?
trans kids at schools. It's like they're encouraging it. The kids that would go along with it would get treated better. So I think if you have kids, it's very important that you have like honest, critical conversations with them. Don't try to pressure them that your views are right, but ask them questions, make them learn to think for themselves. Otherwise, because they're getting bombarded, a good chance they're getting bombarded by their teachers, kids getting told weird stuff, like they can pick their genders and who knows what else.
It's so bizarre because like I'm only in my 20s, but like, so it's not like that long ago, but it's still long ago since I was a child, but we never had those conversations.
Yeah.
It's just weird. I don't know when this sudden shift happened.
Well, here's another weird one. There's a fighter I know. I'm not gonna say any names, but
Okay.
he has a daughter in school, and the teacher was telling her people aren't gonna like you because you're Mexican. He was furious. He's like, "Why would you tell my daughter that? Like, I get treated completely normal, and you're putting in my daughter's head that white people aren't gonna like her, and she's like half white, and they're not gonna like her because of her Latinx or whatever the
That's
teacher trying to say."
awful.
But at least he went and I think he went and chewed the teacher out and like don't fill my kid's head full of this BS.
That just perpetuates the whole cycle of problems and poverty by, teaching someone victim mentality from such a young age.
It 100% does, and like that's what I know is my daughter's school, and luckily my friend he saw this right away and went in and confronted the teachers once he started talking to his daughter, seeing what they were teaching. Unfortunately, I never went and confronted the teachers. I think that was the peak of my fight career. My mind was too laser focused on that. But I did talk to my daughter, and I would ask her questions and see what they're being taught. And I would have honest conversations and taught her to critically think. And then she'd go in and challenge the teachers, and they would get mad at her and yell at her and call her stupid. But at least it got her to, at least she was confident enough to go and challenge them and realize there's other ways of thinking.
That's wild. The closest I came to that kind of political indoctrination was when I was 17. I was in an American politics class, and it was so liberal, so left wing, and I wasn't really like smart enough at the time. But there was a guy in class who was like super conservative, very capitalist, and yeah, he got kicked out of class because he kept interrupting. He kept saying, "You're teaching with a narrative."
Yeah, no, a lot of these teachers, they don't want to be challenged at all. And it's weird because when I was in school, I didn't know I had no idea what any of my teachers were. I didn't know what their politics were. I didn't know if they were gay or straight. I didn't know. There's no reason I should know this.
Correct.
But it's changed so much in such a fast period of time. I think people are finally starting to see it now, but I don't think still they don't know the level it's at. And it's weird. My daughter went to Marin, so it probably creeped in that school a little earlier, but it seems like it's creeping all over the country.
Yeah, I think in the UK as well, actually, because I was at a dinner a few weeks ago, and a woman was telling me her daughter is having these kind of conversations. But you mentioned Blair White. She's super cool, and I there's two things you mentioned that I want to ask you. So number one, the first question is, how come you have no problem calling her a woman? Because most people don't.
Yeah, I just think because it's the respectful thing to do. Because she treated me nice, I liked her, and if you ask me, hey, is that really a woman? I'm gonna tell you no. It's not. But I think it'd be disrespectful if she's treated me with respect. Why wouldn't I treat her with further respect? And I think she's great for the community because all the trans I'd seen on online, all the trans activists, they made me start to like question and be like, man, these trans people are psychopaths. They're defending a guy who's like jerking off in a girl's bathroom and like playing women's sports. Because all I was seeing was negative with trans, and that's like the first trans person I hung out with out in Austin. I'm like, oh, she's actually really nice. She's smart. I can talk to her. She get along. So maybe, obviously, it's still weird her condition, but at least she can see that she's not trying to say it's like normal, and she gets it, and she's a nice, intelligent person. So He goes, okay, all trans people aren't bad, and they need to put faces like her up to get accepted, not the ones they're putting up. They're putting these weird, creepy sociopaths, the trans activists, instead of someone who's smart and intelligent like Blair.
Yeah, I think that's the point, because you sort of like aren't allowed to have a conversation about this because they sort of automatically think that, you know, you're inciting violence and all this stuff, which is obviously not true. And yeah, you're right. Blair is like super smart, intelligent, respectful. So why would you want to offend her? If she says, I'd like you to call me she, you'd say, yeah, like, sure, out of
Yeah,
respect. Why not?
I'm not going to pretend like she was really a woman, but I'm willing to call her a girl. It's like disrespectful not to. If she's respectful to me, like it'd be rude not to. So yeah, I have no problem calling her a girl as long as she doesn't try. The part is they're trying to make you believe it really is a girl. There's no difference biologically. And clearly, you know, if she was to fight another woman now, she would have huge advantages.
Well, let's get into that, because that was my second point. How do you feel about trans women in women's sports, so biological men in women's sports?
I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. You're not going to give someone estrogen for a year and they're going to be weaker. They might get a little weaker, but it's not going to be massive. I mean, it's as you've noticed, there's never been a trans what is it, a trans man. They compete in women's sports still. They don't go compete in women and men's sports even though they're on testosterone, because it doesn't make it, you know, they're too weak. So it just doesn't make sense. And I think we are seeing some improvement in that, because I remember like a year or so ago when I would post stuff about it, I would just get all hate. I know a lot of people believed with me, but I believed what I said. But no, people would be afraid to, especially girls, they'd be afraid to comment on my post, like my post, like on Instagram. You could just tell they were scared. You know, they probably see it and agree with what I said, but they wouldn't say anything. But after the swimming incident, I would post stuff, and I just saw the tide shift. I saw tons of girls commented on it, and I think it's extremely, generally, you know, I'm not a feminist, and I think it's a man's job to fight for a woman. But I think in this particular instance, women are going to have to stand up for themselves, because what happens when women aren't saying anything, everyone's like, well, the women don't care. Why do you care? That's what everyone kept telling me. So it was great to see women finally start to speak up over this last, I think the swimming incident was so absurd. They realized, wow, we really are going to get all of our sports taken away. Men aren't able to come into our bathrooms. And you know, the bathroom one gets tricky, because someone like Blair probably could use the women's bathroom without being a problem. But the problem is you can get a creepy guy that can just be identified as a woman and come in there, and they will do it. There are creepy guys out there. For sure, you know, there's creepy guys out there that'll do creepy shit they can get away with.
Yeah, you make so many good points. I mean, do you ever, because it's infiltrated swimming, right? So and weightlifting as well.
Yep.
As a professional fighter, do you think this will start to infiltrate the UFC?
It's already been in pro fighting. There's been 2 of them that have fought, obviously, you know,
Okay.
beat girls up. But the UFC is going to be hard, because I know Dana's not going to want it. But the UFC is owned by Disney. Disney's huge on this trans stuff, so it gets a little complicated. There might be a power struggle at some point. Whether does Dana White make the decisions, or do the execs at Disney make the decisions?
Yeah, and I think the point you made as well about women, I'm also not a feminist. I think it's annoying and it gives me a headache, and I think it's counterproductive.
Yes.
That's for another show. But I do think, you know, it is I think a man's job in this world is to protect women. Like, I think that's what he's on this planet for. She has other roles, he has roles.
Exactly.
But you're right. If women don't start speaking up, then we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and I think I think it'd be great if women didn't have to speak up. I think it should be our job to protect them. They shouldn't have to speak up, but unfortunately, it seems like they have to in this situation, because it's just too weird. If it's only the men speaking up, it gives the other side to be like, well, only men care, and clearly, most women agree. Like almost most people agree with what we say, but they make you think it's the opposite. Like, remember one time I was talking crap about a fighter, you know, a man that beat up a woman, and it's by far the hardest I've ever been spammed on Twitter. You know, I had hundreds of inboxes telling me they hate me, and thousands of messages telling me how stupid I was. And I'm a smart person, because I can see this is not the real world. This is just like hate mobs online, or maybe even bots. But you can see, if you've never had hate in your life, how that could freak someone out. Like I've been hated in fighting before. I've had people throw shit at me, been booed by thousands of people. I can handle a hate mob. But if you've never had a hate mob, and you have 10,000 people telling you, kill yourself, you're a piece of shit, you're a bigot, you can see how people would get scared and back down and be like, okay, maybe I was wrong, and not want to fight it.
Yeah, it gets brutal out there. It gets really, really aggressive. But no, I think that it's definitely a strange situation to be in. And do you think there's any point whereby like hormones could really equalize the playing field?
Not that they have now. I mean, maybe they could invent something, but I don't think there's any way to do it. And it's yeah, it's unfortunate, if trans can't compete in sports, but it just might be the reality of it. You can't take for a small, tiny bit of the population and kill women's sports, or they can go, if you're a trans woman, you compete in men's sports, or you can go to trans league. And yeah, it sucks for them, but they're just not a large enough percentage of the population to completely screw over women. It's just not fair to completely destroy their sports. And it's an athlete. I think that one, I take it seriously because I know how much work we put into sports, and I do think less women put the kind of work into sports as men do. But the ones at the top, they do sacrifice their whole life trying to make it to the top. And if you have these girls, they're just grinding, trying to win a national champ, and someone comes in there, switches over, from a man to a woman, and goes and takes their title away that they've spent, in some cases, 15 years struggling to win. It's just that one really gets me because I can relate being an athlete.
I guess it's funny because it's not the other way around, right? Like you sort of mentioned
No.
this earlier. So doesn't that just
Yeah,
sort of like prove the point?
it completely does, but they're just quiet on it. And the trans men, they actually compete against women because they know they can't stand a chance against men. And they allow them to take steroids. So they get to go in there on steroids because they're trans, so they can break the rules. It's completely unfair and stupid.
Has there been a trans man, so a biological woman that
Yeah.
has beaten a biological man?
In any sport or fighting, definitely I
I
don't think
don't
it's
know.
too likely. I mean, there'll be one-offs. I'm sure there's some
Yeah.
girls that could beat some guys in some sports, but a girl's never gonna beat a top guy. That's the
Yeah,
whole
no,
debate.
I
I
get that.
remember like Ronda Rousey's amazing, but there was one point where Joe Rogan's like, "Oh, I think she'd take some of the men in the UFC." It's like, come on, Joe, I love you, but if you really think a woman's going to beat a top fighter, yeah, she's going to beat up an average dude for sure on the street,
Yeah.
but not a professional fighter.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think it's funny because I don't really believe in the patriarchy as
Mhm.
such. But like if there was a patriarchy, like this is the patriarchy. It's like men taking over women's
No,
sports.
no, it is, and that part of me wants to just laugh as not being a feminist. It's like, oh, men win again. We're taking your sports. We're taking your locker rooms. Part of it's like funny, and I want to just laugh. But then you look at it, and it's like, it's disgusting. I have a daughter. It's like, it's just not fair. There's, men and women are different. There's no reason why we shouldn't have separate spaces. I like it when I go to the gym and it's all men and we can, have camaraderie and get along. And maybe that's part of the reason why fighters think one way, because we go in big groups of men and we hang out, we talk crap to each other, we beat each other up, and we have like a group of people you can relate to. I think women need that too.
Yeah, well, women, we can't do that. We're not built
That's
that
true.
way.
We
We're
all pick
not
each
built
other
that
apart.
way. Basically, unfortunately, that's the reality of it. I much prefer the way the men do it. It's better. But yeah, okay. Speaking of that locker room style and talk and things like that, freedom of speech is massively under attack. And Elon Musk sort of seems like he's here to save the day. So I'd like to get your thoughts on Elon Musk acquiring Twitter. Do you think this is actually going to improve the whole sphere?
I think it will. It's, you never know what his real motives are, but he seems pretty genuine. I think he really cares about free speech. I mean, he's a guy who too, I think a year or two ago, started kind of putting his real thoughts out there. He was the guy I never knew anything about. And I think the lockdowns where it got to him. He started slowly putting little things out like, this sucks. And now he's one of the best people on Twitter. He fully puts on, I'm sure he doesn't put his whole self out there, but he puts on all kinds of interesting, intriguing tweets that none of the other billionaires are doing. He puts a little personality out there and shows he cares about free speech. And he was anti-lockdown, which is huge, and stuff like that. And I'm sure I don't agree with everything, but he seems like he's one of the more interesting men of our entire generation. I mean, he gets hate a lot, but the guy, revolutionized, banking with PayPal, electric cars with Tesla, which, I'm not even for the environment, but I have a Tesla because they're amazing cars. Like, people hate on it, but you drive those things. It's like, you don't even really
That's
want to drive
so
your other cars
cool.
after that. It's like, they're so
Yeah.
quick. I can put self-driving on it, let my car drive itself. It's like, he makes a good fucking car. People can hate on it because it's electric, but you think the left's like, I'm unsure if electric cars are better for the environment, but that's what the left's saying. And then they hate the guy who does that, and he's revolutionized rocket ships. And now hopefully he's defending free speech. And I'm pretty sure he's sincere. I know a lot of people say he's not, but I think he's sincere with wanting to protect free speech.
Yeah, I do agree. I think he's also sincere. But speaking of that hypocrisy, did you see the tweet that he did where Bill Gates asked if he would invest in his philanthropy or whatever, and he was like, "But you still have a really big short position on Tesla," and he was
I
like,
didn't see
"Yeah."
that tweet, but that's
Oh, you didn't see it?
but I heard him mention something about how he heard that he had a huge short against him. And it's
Yeah.
yeah, they're really trying to short the company that would save the environment. They're saying they're environmentalists. It's I mean, I actually had a lot of friends that had shorts against Tesla because they thought he was overhyping it and it was going to collapse. And to be fair, it was, there was one point where the company could have collapsed, but I just, I didn't have one at that point, but I drove the cars and I'm like, man, this company's going to come through. This guy makes too good of cars, but it is possible to make a great product and still fail. But luckily Elon Musk managed to push through and I think they're the biggest car company in the world now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also not that like big and crazy on fixing the environment or whatever. I don't know, but the cars are amazing. The screen and the way you can see the people
Yep.
walking. Wow.
Yeah, he just makes a good car. You can't deny that. If I had other expensive cars, but the Tesla drives up with it. It can compete with cars that are way more expensive. That's my opinion. Yeah, there may be like, some elite cars might outdrive them, but they're gonna be way more expensive to maintain. Same too, once you get a Tesla, there's zero money to maintain it, zero gas, it just drives.
So are there, just back to Elon Musk and free speech and stuff like that, are there any accounts that you think are going to come back? Like, do you think Donald Trump will be reinstated?
I think he will if he comes back because he has his own True Social, which is stupid because these niche ones just don't work. No one wants to, or some people want to. I don't want to go in a circle jerk where everyone thinks exactly the same. That's why I went on Gab or one of those for a second. I'm like, it's all it is everyone thinks exactly the same. I like following liberal accounts and seeing how I like seeing how other people think. I'm not trying to put myself in a little like box where everyone says the exact same thing, and that's what True Social is going to be. It's funny, we're probably now some little liberal ones start up that are huge censorship. This is going to be, they won't get big though. That's why
they'll ban themselves into like non-existence.
And that's what everyone kept telling Elon to start a new one, but he realized it was too late. Twitter has become the place, and you can't change that now. So even when I hated Twitter, I never threatened to leave because I knew that was where the dialogue happens, and it is. People that aren't on Twitter, they don't realize how impactful it is. They're like, oh, most people aren't on there, but it's where all the news is shaped, where all the information is put out there first. Is where people are fact checked. When they try lying, people on Twitter will go out there and see, it's the only place you can see the truth. And that's why they're so scared of Elon buying it, because they want to be able to control what we see and what we don't.
So on that point, because you did tweet about that, actually, you tweeted saying that the elites are freaking out over Elon buying Twitter. I agree, and I think many woke celebrities are threatened that their accounts are gonna go, or they're threatening to delete their own accounts. And I think actually some British ones have actually left Twitter already.
They'll be back.
But say that again. Sorry.
They'll be back.
They'll be back. Yeah, exactly. But okay, so why do you think then it was celebrated when Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post? It was like celebrated as this huge cultural innovation, this huge cultural shift. And then Elon Musk wants to buy Twitter and everyone's crying.
Well, because Jeff Bezos is going to play along with the narrative, and they know that, and Elon Musk might not. And it's like they could always censor through the mainstream media what we saw before. And it's like, everyone talks about how fake the media became. Maybe they've always been that fake and we just couldn't tell because we didn't have Twitter to fact check them. I mean, there's so much stuff throughout history that who knows? They could have been lying to us all along. You see things like, they convinced us that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and pushed us into that war. With Twitter, people probably could have fact checked it and seen that was, fake statistics. And, Fauci has lots of time. Any doctors that disagree with his AIDS theory, he was pushed off. He gets pulled off TV. If it was nowadays, they could go on Twitter and say their theory, because a lot of people don't think Fauci's AIDS theory is correct, which it is a little weird. Straight people aren't out catching AIDS.
Yeah, you tweeted about that. Can you go into that in a bit more detail? Because I think I'm a bit too young to know what happened.
Yeah, I don't know all the details, but I just know it doesn't pass the smell test. Because when I was a kid, they pushed nonstop fear. If we're out having sex without condoms, we're all going to catch AIDS. And the way colleges are, a nightlife scene, people have a lot of unprotected sex. AIDS would be everywhere. But for whatever reason, AIDS only passed between gay people and intravenous needle users. If you ask someone to name a straight person with AIDS, the only person they'll say is Magic Johnson. But then he never got sick. He never crossed over and got sick from AIDS. He's still healthy. So if you can name one straight person in the entire world, that's a little bit strange to me when they're telling us you catch it this way. Now they do have AIDS in Africa, but it has different characteristics. But Africa is extremely dirty place, dirty sewage. There's a lot going on, so it's hard to say what it is. But you don't realize AIDS is simply it's when your immune system attacks itself and you start having a lower immune system. It's not necessarily one disorder. There could be different ways people are getting it, and I don't know the exact answer what it is, but clearly we should put some research on it. And there is some major doctors that disagree with Fauci, but they just get pushed out and they're scared to question them. I know there are theories out there. I just personally don't know what there are.
You tweeted something about your cousin, if you don't mind me bringing that up. You said that he had AIDS, he was doing fine, and then he took a drug that Fauci was pushing.
Yeah, man, that was terrible because I remember I was a little kid, and that was the time too. Fauci was saying like, maybe you can get AIDS being in close contact. So I was close to my cousin, but then I would get scared being around him, and he was doing okay with AIDS, and they put him on this stuff AZT. And as soon as he went on it, he just, got sick. It's like, I think it's a chemo drug, started getting sick and then died within a couple months. It seemed to just put him out. And I was recently doing some reading on AZT, and a lot of people think that's actually what the biggest cause of the deaths were in AIDS, because there was hardly any AIDS deaths. Dr. Fauci pushed AZT, started pushing that in the public. AIDS deaths spiked as AZT use spiked. Then all of a sudden they realized they were giving people way too much AZT. They cut it way down, and then the deaths of HIV dropped down to almost nothing. Now you hardly hear about people dying of AIDS.
Wow.
So a lot of people think that actually the biggest part of the AIDS epidemic was Fauci killing people with AZT.
That's insane. Like, I don't know about this.
I didn't either.
What year was this?
Like, it was like the late 80s and 90s, and I didn't either, but I remember like when Fauci first took over the thing, I'm like, oh, he seems like a nice guy. My friend John Joseph of Cro-Mags was ranting about what a sociopath, evil guy this is, and I'm like, it's interesting. John thinks this of him. But after recently going back and looking and seeing all the stuff you do, you're like, wow, this guy really is a bad guy. And all the ties to the drug companies he has, and he controls, I believe, 100% of the funding for infectious disease. So he can control what gets studied and what doesn't. So you can't like study any other theories than what he tells you to.
So the question then is this driven by money? Is this driven by, some people talk about depopulation? What do you think?
Yeah, see, I don't really know. My guess would be money and power, but sometimes it's hard to. So many people just seem so evil. You try being like, why? Like, do you need more money?
Yeah.
Like, why are you doing this stuff? Like, why are you torturing puppies, like getting them eaten to death by flies? Like, why? Like,
What
weird
was
shit
that?
like that.
Can you explain that to me as well? Because you tweeted that before we went live, and I didn't have time to like be like, what is this talking about?
They did this weird experiment on these flies that they might have some kind of flesh eating thing, and they put them on these puppies and let them like slowly eat them alive. And some of them lasted up to like 190 something days that they tortured them until they died of just like eating little cute beagle puppies too. It's like,
why'd they do that?
They were trying to see what kind of effect the flies would have on the skin or something. I don't know. I'd have to read the exact study, but it was they have a reason they're going to argue. They're testing something, but we don't need to test it that way, in my opinion. Yeah, you shouldn't test something by torturing puppies.
Yeah, it's just so crazy. It's very strange. But you were recently on Joe Rogan. It's not gone live yet. Am I right? It's not.
No, it went out. It went out a couple weeks ago. He was on the MMA show because he has the MMA show and the regular Joe Rogan podcast.
Oh, because I was looking for it.
Yeah, so I think they kind of separate the MMA and we talked like half politics, half MMA, but when most of the fighters obviously go on the MMA show.
Okay, well I'll check it out. So tell me, how was it?
It's pretty cool. It's kind of weird because it's like 3 hours. That's a long time to talk, and you're kind of sitting there and you're like, after 3 hours, you kind of, I didn't have a watch, didn't have a clock, so I completely lost track of time. So you weren't really sure. And then he kind of stops the show, and you're like, you walk out, and you're like, damn, what did we just talk about? Knowing there's probably millions of people who listen, you're like, well, I hope it wasn't too stupid. But luckily, I've only gotten good feedback. I'm sure there's a few haters that are like, you suck. But overall, everyone's like, oh, you did really good. So it's it's definitely not really nerve wracking, but it's a little weird. You're sitting there just chatting back and forth. But Joe makes you comfortable. He's a guy I've known for years, so it wasn't too weird getting on him. And like I said, with fighting, you don't think about like, oh, a billion people are watching me fight. You don't think about like, oh, like 10 million people might watch this interview. You just kind of want to relax and bullshit. And Joe, he's a funny guy, so we were kind of, our conversation it flowed the whole time. He's a great conversationalist because 3 hours and the conversation never stopped. That's pretty impressive to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just impressive to be able to go on anyway and be able to talk for 3 hours. You said you spoke about politics and fighting. What did you talk about when it came to politics?
Man, we were kind of all over the place. We didn't get into any like really big details. I think little Elon Musk, and to be honest, I haven't rewatched it, and I can like I can hardly I remember it. People will tell me like, "Oh, you talked about this," and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, kind of." But it gets weird. Watch myself give interviews, I'll probably overthink things. So I'm like, I'm just not going to watch it. I'm too critical on myself.
Yeah, I can imagine. But no, I definitely need to check that out. So in terms of just like fighting aside, but just talking about everything that's going on in the world, how driven are you? Like how far do you want to go? Are you just gonna like tweet about it, talk about it? Like what are your plans?
I mean, I have no set plans right now. Ultimately, I try to, look out. I think the best thing you can do is look out for yourself. Make sure you're sustaining
Yes.
yourself. Make sure you're making money for yourself, your family around you, and take care of yourself first. But it is nice to try to help people. The first thing's Twitter. I mean, I have thought about politics, but then you start looking into it, and you're like, man, this is a mess. Do I really want to get involved in this?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a hard one. I think Jordan Peterson was sort of talking about the shift in his life.
Mm-hmm.
He was just a normal man, and then suddenly he's sort of like the most loved and hated person simultaneously. But humanity needs him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's weird. I think it's a lot of times you pick your mind, people will like you more and people will hate you more. So if you can deal with that, go ahead. To me, it doesn't bother me being hated, so I don't really care. I mean, I have all my friends and whatnot. Something that cracks me up is all the time people will like DM me or they'll ask on a post like, what is the one of I guess pretty famous friends? I'm like, what does Nate or what does Chuck think of your opinions? And it's like, dude, they're my friends. You really think they're going on my Twitter? I mean, they might read my Twitter, but you really think they're gonna look at this and get mad at me? We're like brothers. We've been friends forever.
Yeah.
We obviously agree on a lot of stuff, but if we happen to post something they don't agree with, it's not like we're not going to be friends. And some of these people, I feel bad for them. If you have a friend that wouldn't be your friend because something you post on Twitter, and unfortunately, it's like that some places. These liberal places, you post the wrong stuff. I mean, conservatives do it a little bit, but at the moment, it's definitely liberals that are pushing more of the craziness. I never considered myself a conservative, but I get lumped in by being pro free speech, anti lockdowns. I mean, I do like lower taxes, that type of stuff. You get considered like far right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually one of those people, unfortunately, that just like lost a ton of friends because of all of this. Like I just don't align with the whole feminist narrative.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's like self-hating, to be honest, and really counterproductive. And all my friends were like crazy about the lockdown. Like I had a friend who I went for a walk with her in 2020, the beginning of the pandemic in the park, and she like was like miles away from me.
Jesus.
And I was just like, whatever, like I went home and I was sort of like telling my family about it, and I was just like, whatever, it's good to have friends and people around you. So I never cut them off, but they cut me off in the end because they couldn't take my views.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just people grow apart, and that's reality. They can't take who you are, but this is who you are. I think you're going to be a lot happier speaking your mind and making real friends than trying to be fake. And I just noticed I had friends that were like that, who were, their friends were all that way, but they didn't believe that way, and they're trying to fake it and get along and fit in with them. And it's tough. It's like, do you really want to pretend like you agree with these people? But that's how hateful they are. If you don't, they're going to try to cut you out, and that's to me, like I do have friends that are liberal. I have no problem with it. People that, I like having debates, hearing my friends' opinions and why. And that's when you have real friends. But people that get weird and they can't have friends with their opinions, it's on them.
It's on them. Okay, so just last topic. You DM me about crypto. Have you bought any crypto yet?
I have a tiny bit of like Bitcoin, Ethereum, but not much. It's down now, so now it's probably a good time to start buying it. So
yeah, it's tragic. We're at 30.8 right now. I'm like, I'm watching while I'm.
Oh wow, maybe I'll go buy some right after we get off this. That's when you want to buy it. You never know what it's going to do, but it seems like the stock market's down too. It's inflation's high. It's definitely not a good time for anything. Real estate, the interest rates are going up, so housing's probably going to come down. So it's like, where do you put your money? If you hold it in cash, it's losing value, and the stock market, Bitcoin's not doing great. So it's a tough time. But I think. Like I said, more money is like in stocks now. So I think it would make sense to put some of it in crypto. In your opinion, do you just do Bitcoin or do you do anything else?
So, okay, so I get called like a Bitcoin maximalist, which basically means I think Bitcoin is the best, but I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist by some definition. So I think that Bitcoin is the ultimate store of value, despite the
Mhm.
fact that it's down. I think long term, it is the ultimate store of value. I think it's the best form of money that there is. I think everything else is quite interesting. And so I do invest in other things, but I'm also very, very aware of the fact that they are projects, they are centralized, and they are startups. And so that's why I don't really promote very much about the other coins that I buy. As an
Yeah.
example, I hold Solana, right? Like I don't really talk about this too much. I hold Solana, and but Solana is very centralized, it's very VC funded. And the network gets turned on and off again. So like I wouldn't actively like tell people to buy Solana because it's just a
Yeah.
gamble and it's not good money, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I bought a little Dogecoin real quick and made some money real quick. But I bought it knowing it was stupid. I just saw Elon Musk tweeted about it real quick. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go buy some of that real quick, and then it shot up almost 100 times. Unfortunately, I didn't sell it at the top, but still, it went up so much that obviously I was gonna make some money.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's good. You need to get in. You need to know where you can be getting your good interest rates. You need to know how to take self-custody. Do you know about that yet? Self-custody.
No, what's that?
So it's essentially keeping your money. So when you leave your money in a bank, you don't actually own it. Like they can freeze your
Hmm.
funds, right? Like we saw in Canada.
Exactly, like they did in Canada. Yeah, that was kind of a wake up call. Like, man, I need to actually buy Bitcoin, not buy Bitcoin through like these apps.
Well, that's the point. So, like the
Mhm.
CEO of, I think it was Kraken, which is another exchange, he told his customers who are based in Canada. He said, if it comes down to it, we will legally have to freeze your funds. So withdraw your money. So where do you withdraw it?
Mhm.
You take it, and you take self custody and you move it off the exchange and you hold it
Yeah.
directly, just you and the blockchain. That's it. No intermediary, just you and the blockchain. So nobody can freeze your funds.
Yes,
So
and
that's
that's
the really exciting part.
yeah. No, I think that to me is the most intriguing thing about Bitcoin, especially because what happened in Canada, we've never seen that, in modern times in a Western government seize money. But the fact that Canada would do it, we're not much different. I mean, Biden would happily do anything that Trudeau would do. Might be a little harder in the U.S., but they can do it there. It's a reality. They can do it here.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, basically. But the thing with Bitcoin is if it's sitting on an exchange,
Mhm.
it can be taken and
Yeah,
it
they
can be
can't freeze it.
frozen.
Yeah. So at least you
Yeah.
have like, so if they freeze your bank account, you still have money in the Bitcoin. So you still have
No, I'm
means to
saying they
escape.
can. No, I'm
Yeah.
saying they can. They can
Oh yeah.
freeze your
In the
Bitcoin if it's on an
if
exchange,
it's on an exchange, yeah, exactly. But if you have your own keys,
self-custody.
which is what I
Yeah.
need to do because I don't have that yet. So right now I don't really have Bitcoin.
Okay, well, we'll teach you how to do that another time. But yeah, it's just so amazing. And I think what's so interesting is, would you say Canada was like a real wake up moment for you then when it came to Bitcoin?
With the Bitcoin, yeah, I already thought it was interesting, and I wanted to get some, but seeing that, it's like, oh shoot, I really better buy some. My accounts, I have the wrong opinions. My accounts could get shut down, then all of a sudden you have no freedom. They shut your bank account. You can't drive, you can't eat, you can't do anything.
Do you know about central bank digital currencies?
Is that the one the governments are trying to make, or
Yeah, yeah,
I've heard a little
yeah.
bit about it, but don't know a lot. Yeah, I feel like they want to be able to track every dollar. They want to know what you spend. You can't cheat taxes that way. They want to see where your money's going. They can shut your money off if they want. I think that's the
Yeah.
future they want, but hopefully the people push back and resist it.
Yeah, there you go. You're super clued up when it comes to crypto. You know what you're talking about. You got it.
I know a little bit. I have a lot of friends that are in it. Luckily, I had friends that were in it early. They were getting it for like a couple $100s.
Yeah,
Most
wow.
of them
That's
didn't. Obviously,
amazing.
didn't sell at the top, but I have some friends who made pretty good money on Bitcoin. It's like, man, I wish I would have been buying it then.
Yeah, well, despite the fact that it's down, like I always say this, I think Bitcoin's going to a million. I don't know when, maybe 10 years, 15 years. I'd say 500,000 in the next 5 years. Don't quote me, but I'm comfortable to say that because I think it's happening. And yeah, central bank digital currencies are insane. They're just programmable money. So like if you don't have your vaccine or whatever it is, then
Mhm.
you may not be able to go spend, you may not be able to buy certain things. Like I think it was in Canada, you weren't allowed into certain supermarkets unchaperoned, to make
Mhm.
sure that you were only buying essential items. So you were buying, let's just say, like food as opposed to, I don't know, toys or whatever.
Yeah, I think
Whereas
Australia
like,
too.
right. So with a central bank digital currency, you don't need the chaperone. It just becomes a far more efficient way to discriminate, basically.
Yeah, no, I definitely could see him doing this. I was 20 years in San Francisco, and they made it so I couldn't go in a restaurant. Couldn't. I mean, luckily I moved out of there. But when I visited, I couldn't even go in a restaurant. Couldn't go in a bar. I mean, people would let me in bars because people know me and didn't ask me for a thing. But I could go restaurants. People wouldn't ask. But technically, they weren't supposed to let me in anywhere. Luckily, there was a few good people that weren't enforcing the rules. But it's just that's absurd. The city passed, and majority of people were happy to go along with let's cut the unvaccinated people out of society. It's like they tried to cut me out of society a year ago, and I think we're just going to forget.
Yeah, I'm not forgetting. I'm not forgetting at all. So you spent a lot of time in San Francisco, so many years. Have you officially left?
Yeah, I'm in Las Vegas now. I had during the lockdowns, they were just so extreme. I'm like, I gotta get out of here. City was getting. You see everything a liberal city doesn't want to do. They did wrong. Just the homelessness, the dirtiness, the drug addicts over the streets, the crime rate spiking, lockdowns for a year. The gym I was running, we got closed down for a year. People couldn't go to the gym. We were there working out illegally, but how are you going to stay in business when you still have rent to pay and you don't have money coming in? And we're not going to charge people when they're not working out. So it's I was thankful that I knew all the gym owners. I don't know what I would have done if I couldn't work out. I had at that point all my work I was doing was shut down. I had nothing to do to sit around the house, and I'm not to me that's not mentally healthy to sit around and do nothing. I had to go and work out and go and do stuff. And luckily I was able to find people pretty quick that were willing to go to jiu-jitsu with me. Jiu-jitsu is probably the worst thing you could do according to the COVID rules, but hey, I never got sick the last couple of years.
That is, I keep knocking this mic. That is wild. I was at a party actually the other day, and I met a girl from San Francisco. And just given I'm heavily living on Twitter in the metaverse, I hear people complaining all the time about San Francisco. So I said to her, I was like, "Oh, I hear San Francisco's so bad," and she's like, "No, it's not." And I was like, "Oh, I heard there's homeless everywhere," and she's like, "No, it's not. That's just what the conservatives are saying to make you think that it's." And I was like, "Well, I've never been, so I don't really know."
I mean, the things have to go. There are some areas that are not as bad, but the homelessness, drug addicts usually push into a small area, and that area keeps expanding and expanding. So they've pretty much taken over the whole downtown area now. There are areas in San Francisco you can go where they're not there, and the same thing with the crime too. Though it used to be, they'd get you certain spots, but now they're going through residential neighborhoods, stealing your cars, home invasions, robberies. It's just getting more and more lawless. The DA there won't really prosecute crime. I mean. He's so extreme, though, even San Francisco is recalling him because his parents were in prison for killing 3 cops. So this guy hated police, and then somehow he's the one in charge of putting people in jail.
Wow. Yeah, I heard this. Someone was telling me that you could steal up to a certain amount of money, and then they're not going to come after you.
Oh, I think that's all California. That's $950. So they can't arrest you if you steal less than $950. So the cops won't come. So they break in your car. The cops won't even come if you call them. So
how does that make sense?
It doesn't matter. Yeah, they can come up to you and you can just tell the cop to fuck off and keep walking away. Makes no sense, these laws.
Wow. So. Okay. All right. So I won't be moving to California. I'll be staying comfortable here in Florida.
Yeah, Florida seems like Florida, Texas, a few free states. A lot of the states we don't really talk about too, like Arizona, Montana. These places are extremely free. They just kind of fly under the radar.
Yeah, probably for the best. So nobody comes knocking or change anything.
Exactly. And Montana don't want people coming.
Oh, really? That's funny. I'll have to look into that. Okay. So do you have anything that you're working on right now? Or how can people follow you, find you, and keep up to date with everything that you're doing?
Yeah, Twitter, Jake Shields, AJJ. There's Jake Shields on Instagram. As far as stuff I'm pushing, there's not really much they need. I have a clothing line I launched, American Jiu-Jitsu, which is AmericanFight.com. People that are into jiu-jitsu and fighting. I have some DVDs on BJJ Fanatics, but most of my stuff I'm doing is I don't really need promo for.
Amazing. Well, guys, please go follow Jake. He's talking about things that really matter right now. Not enough people are brave enough to speak up about it. So head over to his Twitter if you're not following him already. Jake, thank you so much for coming on. Great. It's been so fascinating speaking with you. And yeah, I want to thank you so much.
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm sure we'll stay in touch and I'll see you at some point. So have a good day.
Absolutely. All right. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to tune in for another episode next week, and we will see you all then.
The Layah Heilpern Show.